everybody. Welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I have coming in from New Mexico, Mark Corske. He wrote the Engines of Domination book a few years ago, and it's actually just been turned into a documentary film, and it looks really amazing. I haven't watched it fully yet. I've just been too busy, but the parts that I did watch looked amazing. It's a really interesting take. He spent about 10 years writing this book, so we're going to get all about the book and the documentary. But the first thing I have to ask you, Mark, is how did you become an anarchist?
More or less in two stages, Jeff. The first stage started in my childhood. I grew up with the nuclear bomb, fallout shelter, advertisements on TV, newsreels of tests, with whole Pacific islands being blown to smithereens, duck and cover drills in school. And I knew enough science even then to be absolutely terrified by these things and the tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. It was also the time of the McCarthy hearings, the great anti-communist witch hunt. So there was a very oppressive atmosphere, although it was quietly oppressive. It came down in my household in the form of a very conservative Republican father, intensely patriotic. And that's kind of how I was indoctrinated as I grew up, in fear and in the sense that there was this great conflict between these two great powers. Also had lots of problems with authority. Then in my mid-teens, I discovered Ayn Rand. It fell head over heels, became a total Randroid. It was my first exposure to philosophy. I didn't really know that such a thing existed. And after a couple of years, some older friends rescued me from indoctrinating myself in Rand's work, but it made me fall in love with philosophy, totally, and made me conclude that political power was something at best that was very dangerous, and I thought she was mistaken in believing that you could really limit it legally. It seemed to me a limited state had right at hand all the means to unlimit itself anytime it so chose, and lots of them had. So I became an anarchist probably by the time I was 18. Wow. Not in any deep philosophical way, but in just the sense that these tremendous powers that were threatening the world with destruction, ready to jump down each other's throats with nuclear warfare, we'd be much better off without them, and I thought we could do without them. The second phase started in my mid-20s. I can only call it a conversion experience. I'd kind of turned away from philosophy, gone back to college after dropping out. I was studying theoretical physics, and without getting sidetracked into why, someone told me to contemplate the newspaper every morning. So from the heights of theoretical physics and mathematics, I'm sitting there realizing I have no idea why any of this is happening. I understand what they're saying. The White House says this, and the Kremlin says this, and Israel says this while they're bombing Lebanon. But there were 70,000 nuclear weapons in the world. There were many explicit wars and the low-intensity conflicts that were just coming into vogue then. The Contras were at work in Nicaragua, and I thought, okay, if I can understand the general theory of relativity, I ought to be able to understand the news. So I set myself the task of figuring political power out on my own, using everything I'd learned in philosophy and everything I'd learned in physics, trying to come at it in my own way. And after about another it was nearly 10 years, I'd begun formulating my theory of political power. That's where I really became a dedicated anarchist, in that I thought I had good reasons for arguing that political power was inherently dangerous, very difficult or impossible to limit, and that essentially it was responsible for all of the tremendous problems and disasters that are threatening our world. And that's where I stand today.
Yeah, and that's where the world stands today. We're still right back where we started by the looks of things with what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia and all the saber rattling once again. And what's your take on what's going on in the world today based on what you've seen in the past?
It's not as terrifying as it was in the 80s with 70,000 nuclear weapons. Now the strategic arsenals are down to 1,000 or 2,000 in both Russia and the United States. But I think the threat of nuclear war may even be greater. Accidental nuclear war is a constant threat. At any time, and at many, many times in the past, it's come a hair's breadth from happening. At any time, something could go wrong and we're toast. But in terms of what they call a limited nuclear war. And you understand a limited nuclear war could kill as many people as World War II in 10 minutes. In terms of limited nuclear war, I think it's more likely than ever, most especially because the United States is militarizing space. It's pursuing a policy of placing kill sats and surveillance sats in space that could neutralize foreign ICBM launches on launch and make it possible to carry out a successful first strike against any country in the world. And now there are so many nuclear powers. Small ones, fine. If Pakistan and India have a handful, that's one thing. China has 200. Israel probably has 200. 200 nukes is a phenomenal threat. So I think it's very, very dangerous. More dangerous in some ways, more likely to happen than ever before.
Yeah, it's quite amazing how a lot of people say us anarchists are dangerous. These are all the state. The U.S. government alone can blow up the world many times over, and it seems intent on making it so that is possible. As you pointed out, they're trying to militarize space now. And yet we're the ones that we get called dangerous for saying, just sort of pointing out, I don't know if this is the best system where you have this group of criminals who take all your money and then build all these weapons to do whatever. And like you pointed out, even if they don't do a war, a total accident is totally possible. I just saw I think it was a news article or something about they just went around to a few U.S. Nuclear silo bases somewhere in like Wyoming or something. And like the doors are just like wide open. The guy was sleeping. Everything's like run on floppy disks from like 1960s. The scope for error and the scope for an accident is it's amazing it hasn't happened yet.
Colin Caldecott used to say that she had evidence that some of the people in the silos took acid. Think of that. And as to what you said about anarchism and violence, one of my favorite retorts is if you want to see violence and chaos, look at Hiroshima on August 6, 1945.
Oh, absolutely. That was a huge terrorist attack, and Nagasaki as well. A totally terrorist attack against civilians, killing, I think, hundreds of thousands of people. Unbelievable, and yet people still wave the flag. I don't know what we're going to have to do to get people to wake up to this, but that's what we're trying to do, and that's why the Engines of Domination, both the book and the movie, is so important. It's another way of getting this information out there. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the book? You spent 10 years writing it, so you must have quite a bit of interesting history to it.
10 years writing that book and over 10 years formulating the theory that's in it. It's a hard book to summarize. It covers a lot of ground. First, it looks at the subtitle is Political Power in the Human Emergency. By the human emergency, I mean all of the disasters that are threatening us today, not just nuclear war, but the wholesale destruction of the habitat, the contamination of the habitat, the threat of biological disasters, either from natural causes as the global climate changes, or man-made causes as people concentrate into cities and become more vulnerable to pandemics, especially with stress and a toxic environment. Certainly the crisis of how the global commercial culture has spread around the world and is wiping out traditional cultures and traditional livelihoods and dragging people into a life that's about as deep as the depth of a computer screen, far removed from human contact, from community, from interconnections, from human values. All of those things are what I call the human emergency. And the central argument of the book is that if you look at political power itself, not particular systems of power, historically, not the particular institutions that any one government may be built out of, but if you look at how political power operates as a device to capture the human energy of a community, and convert it into power and privilege for the rulers, you'll see that it inevitably, as it grows larger and is refined to be more effective, that it inevitably leads to these results. So the first part of the book looks at the human emergency. And then the obvious answer is we're in a human emergency, as to why we're in one, is we're in a human emergency because human beings just are rotten creatures. We're violent, we're destructive, we're greedy, the planet would be better off without us. And it's a very common way of thinking, not necessarily in that virulent a form, but in thinking that we as a species are causing the human emergency, especially the environmental destruction. We are destroying the habitat. We are contaminating the world. People say that. People say, we dropped the bomb on Hiroshima. I didn't. There's this common way of thinking that treats the species as a unit and fails to distinguish between the factions that are in power and that are causing the destruction and the institutions that they must have to cause those effects, and lumps those together with everybody, you and me. So we take the blame for what only a very small part of the species is doing. So the next part of the book looks at human nature. It makes a strong argument that we're certainly not saints, but we're pretty wonderful beings. We're ingenious. Given half a chance, we tend to be cooperative and helpful and to trust one another in our world, and that the destruction that's going on is the result of institutions that require, reward, and enable the worst human capabilities, not that reflect a bad human nature. Then the middle part of the book develops the theory formally. I make a conjecture about how political power could have originated if things had been basically peaceful and cooperative as they were through the Neolithic. I'm not saying there weren't conflicts. I'm not saying there weren't role differences in late Stone Age communities, but they were nothing like what appeared in the early Bronze Age in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Kings, priests, slaves, war, all of that fairly rapidly developed and was unlike anything that had existed in our previous 250,000-year family history. So I make a exaggerated conjecture that if one gang of organized raiders had successfully taken over a prosperous Neolithic town, that could have started the entire process. I don't really believe that's what happened, although I believe there were takeovers like that. But to show how little would be required to start the avalanche of events that led to the world we have today. Then I developed the theory formally. From my physics background, I decided it was best to describe political power as a tool, as an innovation that was created in the early Bronze Age for domesticating human communities. That our outstanding traits as a species are tool making and domestication, harnessing external sources of energy to our own purpose. And I think it was inevitable that eventually some people would apply those traits to their fellow human beings and learn how to domesticate the communities that they wanted to benefit from. And that's what political power really is. It's a device that those factions use to capture the human energy of a community and put it to their own uses primarily at the expense of the community. Now, that made me decide that it should be described as an engine. That's what an engine does. It converts energy to useful work, like a car converts the heat energy that you get by exploding fuel into the useful work of turning the wheels and making the car go. So I don't want to go into detail about how the engine actually works, but the central part of the book does that, discussing that there are certain components that the engine has to function that end up corresponding to the institutions that you see in any system of political power. Then there are two chapters that describe how political power has evolved through Western history, starting in the early Bronze Age, and showing in particular how the big innovations in destruction, the harnessing of horsepower, and then gunpowder, then steam power, high explosives, and nuclear energy corresponded closely to big changes in the form of political power overall, and finally led, inevitably, I think, to the human emergency. The last chapter is a speculated discussion about what we might do to reduce and ultimately abolish political power and what kind of world that might make possible. So that's the book.
Yeah, so you brought up so many great things. Let's start with the last part. You talk a little bit about how we might be able to reduce political power. What are a few of the sort of theories or ideas you have on how that can happen?
There's certainly no simple solution. This is a problem that really no one's ever tackled. People have tried to bring down particular systems of power, but never eliminate political power as such, never abolish that kind of institution per se. And I have no idea how that can be done in general. It's a problem that's going to take the creative energy and the dedication and the organization of many groups of people all over the world who are being really hurt by really bad conditions so that they're motivated enough to band together and come up with the things that will work, if it's ever going to happen. But what I focus on in the last chapter of the book is thought control. Until 200 years ago, thought control was mainly for the upper classes through education and mainly imposed on the lower classes through state religions. You know, mind your own business, don't cast the first stone, save your own soul, let the big people do what they do and obey the authorities. With the innovations of mass printing, cheap paper, then first radio and then the other mass communications, it's become a primary component of modern political power. I call political power in the sense of that theoretical engine of mind, domination with a capital D. It's become an essential component of that engine now. And I think in many ways it's the weakest link in the system. That what everyone can do, what you're doing, what I'm doing right at this moment, is to provide little challenges to the thought control system, to speak our minds, to raise difficult questions, to encourage one another that we're not just crazy, thinking that the world is crazy, and that there really is a much better way to live, to be brave enough to challenge the existing doctrines, to work outside the little teeny confines that the thought control system imposes. And most of all, since thought control largely works by just keeping people from thinking and making it an unfashionable and often impossible expenditure of energy. If you're wiped out from working 2 jobs, all you're going to do is zone out and recharge your batteries for the next stint. Set an example of people who think about the world and talk about the world and think that thinking about what's going on and really understanding what's going on is important. Everyone can do that. And if the thought control system were weakened, even slightly, that could make all of the other organized actions that are going to be necessary to make other changes work much more powerfully. So that's what I focus on. Not any kind of complete answer, but one definite thing we can all do and that would certainly help.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is the way, and I think it's happening. I think thanks to the internet, people are getting access to this sort of information. People like Stefan Molyneux, a past Anarchast guest, 2-time guest, he's got the largest philosophy show in the world on the internet, and it's literally millions of people listen to him. Which isn't very many yet, but we need to get those up to tens and hundreds of millions, and then maybe even a billion one day. But many others, are, like yourself, everybody, we're all putting out this information. People are actually getting access to it, and I can actually see the changes happening dramatically. People are getting outside of this thought control program, the TV programming. That's really an important thing. For anyone watching and you don't know what's going on, if you live in a place like the U.S., just turn off your TV. Just turn it off. That thing is a mind control box. And it's amazing how your perspectives and how you're able to think and how you're able to live much happier is once you just turn off that box. And so for you, having come through the first Cold War, as they called it, which is mostly, in my opinion, all faked by the same old cast of characters, Donald Rumsfeld and all those guys. They wanted the what do they call it? PNAC, the Project for a New American Century. They're always looking for enemies so that they can continue to build their power because they use fear to control people. So it must be quite amazing for you to see, having gone through that, through like the 60s, 70s, and then to see today with the internet some of the changes. Have you noticed that there's definitely an awakening going on?
I think it's dramatic. If you think back to the Indochina Wars, to the late 60s and early 70s, where I kind of cut my political teeth, the depth of understanding of our problems is dramatically better. Back then, it was a question of whether this was a just war or if it was being fought for profit. And the other upheavals were about women's rights, Black rights, Native American rights. And the gay movement was beginning then too. But there were specific issues where there were lacks of liberty or immoral things being done. Now the whole system is being challenged. There's a very widespread understanding that corporate power in the United States and transnational corporate power is behind a great range of, I forgot to mention the environmental movement that also began in those decades. That corporate power is behind everything from the environmental problems to the human rights problems to the military problems in the world. That's a huge step forward. Not that I believe that it's a matter of good guys and bad guys. It's the institutions that make such concentrations of power possible. The people are seeing those institutions. Now you can actually say Wall Street and mean something instead of something amorphous like the United States. So there's been a huge deepening of understanding, and I think way more of the population does understand. On the other side of that, there's a much more intensely indoctrinated sector of the population that's being cultivated quite consciously to oppose that, and vocally and with a lot of funding get a high visibility platform for debunking it and so forth. But the change is dramatic, and it's really promising.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing to see, and I agree also that there's two sides. There's the people who are awakening, and there's a lot of them, and it's happening every day, and I mean a lot. And then there's the other people who have been getting more indoctrinated and more put asleep and just turned into robots. And I think a lot of people are sort of feeling that. I know when I go to the U.S., it's not so much down here in Mexico because people aren't anywhere near as indoctrinated, and they're also much more, well, I wouldn't say they're more awake, but they live actually just a more natural life. You brought up earlier about how they're trying to destroy communities and all that. In this area where I am in Acapulco, they still have a sense of community. There's still a sense of family, things like that. So it's a little bit different. But when I go to the U.S., you can really see it. There's this tension. You can see these people are waking up, and then there's these other people who are just like, shut up, you can't say that you're crazy, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're a truther. I love it when they call people who are trying to find the truth truthers, like that's an insult. So yeah, it's quite dramatic, and that's actually one reason I'm going to have this conference here in Acapulco called Anarchast, February 27th to March 1st. I don't know if you know about that, Mark, but you're welcome to come down, and we'd love to have you speak at it. It's going to be a lot of free-minded people, a lot of people who are awake, and they're not only just talking about what's going on, they're actually making changes. A lot of the people are people like Luke Rudowski of We Are Change. He's putting out independent media. Dana Martin, she's leading up an entire movement towards peaceful parenting and unschooling, getting kids out of those public indoctrination camps. All kinds of people like that. Cody Wilson, who's making 3D printed guns so you can't actually regulate guns. So it's going to be an amazing group of people, and it's also good for them to get outside of the U.S. for a bit, because you can go crazy up there. You're in a small town in New Mexico, so you're okay, but I wouldn't want to spend too much time in the big cities in the U.S., and I don't like to. You can just sense the amount of tension in the society.
It's scary out there. It's scary enough from my very distant vantage point here in New Mexico.
Yeah, and it's going to get weirder and crazier and scary, but it also has the potential to have massive, amazing, good times as well as people start to awaken. But I think we're going to have to go through some worse times before we have the potential to get to what could possibly be a totally much more peaceful and prosperous world if we can get rid of these power structures. So that's why a book like yours is so important.
A book and a movie. The breakthrough for me, I published the book, I self-published the book. I made some attempts to get it published, but it's obviously not a best-selling book by any means. It's 300 pages, and it's very closely reasoned, and there's a lot in it. It's a good book, and it's clearly written, but it's nothing anybody's going to make money publishing. Responses trickled in, a few nice reviews, a few sales, but then early last spring, Justin Jazuski, an independent filmmaker in Chicago, happened upon it on Amazon, contacted me through Facebook, and was very enthusiastic about making a documentary about it. And at first, I was totally skeptical. First, I had no idea what kind of documentary films were being made nowadays. And second, I'm a thinker, I'm a writer. I couldn't imagine a documentary about philosophy, let alone something as technical as mine. But I looked at his films, they were really good, and I really liked him, so I agreed, and I'm astounded at what he accomplished. I collaborated with him. I provided the script and the narration, and worked with him on a lot of editing decisions and suggestions. But that film is his creation, and he's brilliant. He's brought the ideas to life in a captivating and beautiful and often deeply moving way that I never could have imagined. And it's reaching people. If my book disappeared right now, I would be happy that his film is out there to convey the few essential points that I really think are telling about human nature not being the problem, about the institutions being like a mechanism that has to work the way it does and that causes the kinds of disasters the world is falling into, and about anarchism being the solution, theoretically, in the sense of banning those kinds of institutions, and about that it being in principle possible because we are such ingenious and creative creatures. It's thrilling to me to see the impact it's had in just 2 weeks. We've received people are friending me on Facebook out of the blue. People are writing wonderful comments. It's had close to 17,000 views in 2 weeks, which is nothing by viral standards, but an hour-long philosophical documentary about human problems is not going to be a 10 million viral hit, no problem. I know for every film like ours, there must be many in the making or already out there doing that kind of work. And that's a kind of impact ideas could never have had before. It's really thrilling to me to see that happen, and I'm so proud of having been part of a project like that with a creative person like Justin.
Yeah, it's great. And Justin contacted me and he hooked us up, of course. So he's very enthusiastic about it. And I'm definitely going to watch the entire thing at some point. I've just been so busy, but the parts I did see look excellent. So we're going to definitely have a link to it down below. And for all the people out there, these are things that you can be doing. Like we have a lot of anarchists who are people who aren't necessarily all that busy, but they want to do something. Well, just do something like what Justin did. If you know of a book that you really like that has been turned into a documentary, approach the author, just like Justin did. And who knows, maybe the author, like Mark, will be very excited. And you can see Mark's very excited about what has happened. And that's another format to get these sort of views out, because books are great. Books are needed, obviously, because you can go into the fine detail and make your complete case, which you can't do in a documentary unless you want it to be 24 hours long or something like that. But documentaries, on the other hand, have a totally different way of getting to people. They use imagery and sound that evoke emotions and get people into the real meaning of the message. And so they're both very necessary and very, very important to getting these messages out there. And as you can see, just in a few weeks, 17,000 views. I wouldn't be surprised if that's 100,000 views in another few weeks. So that's 100,000 people possibly within the next month or two that will be touched by this information that they may not have actually had access to before. So it's very exciting.
The exciting thing is applying creativity to the process of changing the world. That's one side. Now, struggle and organizing and action is another whole side. You can have all the wonderful documentaries and all the great ideas and all the beautiful art, songs in the world, but if they don't motivate people to act, nothing's going to change. But that motivation is critical, and guiding the action by affirming that people are right in what they're pursuing and wrong in what and right in what and that what they're opposing is wrong, that can be a very powerful catalyst and food for the soul as people carry out these struggles. The struggles are what count. A psychologist friend of mine used to say, insight and $1 gets you on the bus. It's going to take way more than $1, and as you said earlier, it's going to take some very difficult times, great hardships, I think, and great suffering to really turn things in a substantial way. But I believe that's underway around the world, and when the power of human creativity gets going and it chooses a goal and sticks with that goal, unforeseeable and marvelous things are possible. I think political power is a result of that. I think the creative idea that you could domesticate communities and basically rule the world, take control of the world, that dream, that creative idea, and the creative innovations that were made in developing institutions to make it possible is why we're in such trouble. If the creative idea can nearly destroy the world, which we're very close to now, then our creative ideas now have the power to make us a better one.
Absolutely, and it's happening all over the place. It's going to be exciting and interesting times. So I'm really glad to have Mark on. And Mark, so why don't you let us know where people can get your book? And I presume it's the documentary's on YouTube. If you can just let people know where they can get access to that, and we'll definitely put the links down below.
That's great. The book is at Amazon, of course, and also it's distributed by AK Press, the big anarchist distributor in Oakland. For the video, it's on the Lifting Veils channel at YouTube, where you can just Google Mark Korske's Engines of Domination. That's Corske. It's all over Google. It's being shared quite widely now too. And I do want to mention a recent development. It's being translated into, right now it's being translated into Portuguese and Greek. It's been translated into Polish, and we just heard today that someone's going to translate it into Spanish. So there will soon be 4 other language subtitled versions, and we hope many other. If any of your viewers like the movie and would be willing to translate and subtitle it into any language, we would just be overjoyed. Just get in touch with us. Facebook.
Yeah, no, it's that's another way. So if you speak another language, translate some of these things, some of these books, or as we had Jorge Truco on, he translated The Market for Liberty into Spanish. It's doing very well. And if you could see a documentary like Mark's or any others that you really like that are really freedom-minded, hopefully, that if you speak another language, just translate it, and that opens up. All of a sudden, you have a documentary that only had a market of maybe total possible market of a billion people. Now it has 2 billion. You just doubled the total capability of getting that information out. So these are all ways you can do it. And just so you know, the other ways that you can do these sort of things is just like and share these sort of things. It's so easy to change the world today. You don't necessarily have to go out in the street and start fighting people or shooting people. You really just have to share this information, like it. You don't have to necessarily put it in their face if you have a family member who's not open to it, they're too asleep. Don't be constantly pushing this stuff at them because it's just going to irritate them. You have to find other ways to do it, or just get away from them, because I just don't like to be around people who aren't even able to think. But just like and share these sort of things. So I'd like to thank Mark a lot. Really interesting, and he's got a really interesting take on it. I can tell from what I quickly looked at the book and at the documentary. It's a completely different style look at these sort of things. He's got a very technical sort of physicist sort of mind, and he comes at it from that sort of angle. So it's a totally different way of looking at it. So definitely check out Engines of Domination, and we'll have the links to it down below, and share it with as many people as possible, and hit like, and that's all you got to do. It's not that hard. You can free yourself. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.